One of the things to keep in mind is that oftentimes the penalty will be double. A person may have to sacrifice 2 animals, for example, instead of 1 if they commit one of those violations. Now, what is ihram? You may have heard me use the word ihram. I'm assuming everyone knows, but some more details about it. Commonly, it refers to the clothing that a person wears. But in reality, it's the state that a person is in. As for the literal meaning, ahrama yuhrimu ihraman, means to declare something unlawful on yourself. Right? Similar to the takbir tahrima in your salah. Right? Why do we call it tahrima? We're making certain actions prohibited on ourselves. When we're praying salah, you're not allowed to talk, you're not allowed to eat or drink or things of that nature. So likewise, in ihram, you're making certain things prohibited on yourself. Right? We'll talk about the different things you're not allowed to do in ihram, but the main point over here being that it refers to a state that you're in. It's not necessarily the clothes. You could just put on an ihram, you wouldn't be in the state of ihram. Likewise, you could be wearing your normal clothes and intend the ihram, in which case you'd be in the state of ihram without wearing an ihram. So they're 2 different things. One is the clothes and the other is the state. Ihram is really more so the state, but we use the same word when we talk about the clothes of ihram as well. As far as the clothes of ihram are concerned, for the males, it's 2 white, new or washed sheets of cloth. So they don't have to be new, but you should wash them though before entering the state of ihram. As mentioned before, there's a lower garment tied around the waist. Then there's an upper garment, which you can use it like how a person would use a shawl, where you put one end of the shawl over one shoulder and the other end of the shawl on the other. We'll talk later about istiba', which is where you uncover the right shoulder. The reason why I'm bringing it up now is because many people, they keep their right shoulder uncovered the entire time, but that's not necessary. Right? We'll talk about how there's just specific tawafs in which you do that. When you're not doing those tawafs, then it's better to just have both shoulders covered. When it comes to the footwear, so females don't have to worry about this, which is why I would say females should just get as comfortable footwear as they can, because once again, there's a lot of walking. When it comes to males, then you have to make sure that the upper part of the foot is not covered. So in regard to this, because this is probably one of the things we get a lot of questions about around this time of the year, my WhatsApp is full of pictures of people's feet. Is this shoe okay? Is that shoe okay? So generally what I tell people is I just send them this link and they can figure out on their own. It has all the details as far as which bone is it exactly. There's a foot right there for you. And it gives you examples as well as, what would be examples of things like, something like this would be okay. Obviously, these basic flip-flops are okay. When it comes to flip-flops, though, I would recommend something more so like this. Personally, when I went, I bought a pair of Crocs, the flip-flop version of them, because they were quite thick. They had a nice sole. There was buy one, get one half off, so I bought one for myself, bought a pair for my father, so we were going together. And I would say, though, that if you can, try and place something here. Like I took an earplug and placed that there because this area in between the toes, if you're wearing them for a long time and doing a lot of walking, then, especially if you're wearing like one of these simple ones, then it can really like cut into the skin between your toes. So put something there, maybe some tissue or something. What I did was just take an earplug and use a rubber band or a string and tie it there so that it's not as irritated. And once again, you can check out the details. You just have to Google Islamic portal and footwear ihram, and that should come up, inshallah. So coming back to the clothes that a person wears in the state of ihram. Sorry, you skipped ahead a little bit. When it comes to the female's clothes, as I was alluding toward earlier, there's not really that many restrictions. She can just continue to wear the abaya, the scarf, gloves, socks, shoes, the things that she normally does. There's a misconception that some people have, not so much in Desi culture, but in other cultures, the idea that she has to wear white, but that's not the case. Even for men, technically you don't have to wear white, but it is recommended for men to wear a white ihram. For females, there's no such recommendation, so any color would technically be fine. One thing that they do have to look out for, though, is, and it applies to men as well, if you're wearing like a surgical mask or something, generally that wouldn't be okay. Right? So likewise for a female who wears niqab, then she should not have it such that it's touching the face. So commonly what women do is that they'll have a cap or something similar that has a bill, and then the cloth hangs over the bill of the cap so that the cloth is draped over the face without touching the face. Right? So that's what she would do while she's in the state of ihram if she wants to keep her face covered without it being on the face. As for when the ihram should be worn, this is done at the miqat. So the miqat refers to the boundary that surrounds the haram. So you have the haram boundary, which is this shape over here, and then you have this egg sort of shape going around that. These represent the mawaqit. Does anyone know what's the miqat that the Prophet ﷺ used when he went for Hajj? Dhul Hulayfa, right? Very good. Right, because the Prophet ﷺ was going from Medina. So when you're going from Medina, you're north of Mecca. So that's generally where you will stop, is at the masjid in Dhul Hulayfa. It's not necessary to stop there, but that is the sunnah. If a person is able to do so, that they stop there. If they're taking the train or some other means of transport where they're not able to do so, then it's fine. You'll just enter the state of ihram before you leave. Technically, you could do it on the train too, but generally a person would do that before they leave Medina. If a person is going from Jeddah, so Jeddah is not one of the mawaqit, but it's on the side because this is a common place where people will cross into the miqat. So the airport in Jeddah, if a person is landing there, because Jeddah is inside of the miqat, then you need to be in the state of ihram before you land in the airport. There's actually a certain point where they'll announce that we're about to cross the miqat. So a person needs to make sure to enter the state of ihram before that. So most people would do it at the transit airport. For example, if you're going from here, you may be stopping in Jordan or in Turkey. So when you're at the transit airport in Jordan or Turkey, that's where then you would put on your ihram clothes. It could be useful maybe to just wear the lower garment for now, because with carrying luggage and stuff with the upper garment, it may be difficult. So maybe just put on the lower garment, pack your upper garment in your carry-on. Keep your sandals as well. Oftentimes people forget that. For the men, they need to make it such that their upper foot is not covered. So oftentimes a person will forget that, oh, I packed the sandals, but they're in my check-in or I'm not able to access it. So try and put that in your carry-on as well, so that when you enter the state of ihram, either on the plane or in the airport, then you're able to switch your shoes as well. If a person's landing in Jeddah and then going to Medina, this is a common question that comes up, because sometimes your itinerary is such that you're landing in Jeddah, right? But then you are traveling to Medina and then you're going to Mecca. So if you're going to Medina via Jeddah, you actually don't need to be in the state of ihram. Okay? So if you are going to Jeddah and then Mecca, then yes, you need to be in the state of ihram before you arrive in Jeddah. But if you're going to Medina, Jeddah, and then Mecca, you do not need to be in the state of ihram when you come to Jeddah. You can just come to Jeddah normally and then go to Medina. And after you're done in Medina, then you enter the state of ihram, either in Medina or at Dhul Hulayfa when you're on your way to Mecca. Now, before a person enters into the state of ihram, what should a person do? It's sunnah to take a bath. It's mustahab to trim your mustache, remove the pubic hair, clip the nails, apply perfume. When we say apply perfume, that means on the body, not on the ihram itself, right? So it is okay. It's fine to apply this on a person's body, to apply the perfume, because you're not in the state of ihram yet. And in fact, this is sunnah as well. Right? There's a hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha where she mentions that she applied the perfume of the Prophet ﷺ before he entered the state of ihram. But once again, this would be not on the clothes of the ihram, but on one's body. There's also the 2 rakahs that are prayed when a person is entering into the state of ihram. These are sunnah. Preferably, you can read Surah Kafirun and Surah Ikhlas, but technically you could read any surah that you want. If you are going from Medina, as I mentioned, ideally you want to stop in Dhul Hulayfa when you enter into the state of ihram. That's the sunnah way as well, is that a person stops in Dhul Hulayfa, goes into the masjid there, and then prays their 2 rakahs. Now, after a person prays their 2 rakahs, this is now where you enter the state of ihram, right? So a person, for example, would keep their head covered while they are praying the salah, but once you finish your 2 rakahs, then you take off your hat because covering your head is one of the violations of the ihram. And now you can make your niyyah and you can do your talbiyah. So these things together will put you in the state of ihram. If you only do talbiyah without the niyyah, you won't be in the state of ihram. Likewise, if you only do the niyyah but not the talbiyah, you won't be in the state of ihram. So you need to make sure to do both. So the dua that you can recite for the niyyah is the dua that's here. Allahumma inni uridu al-umrata fayassirha li wa taqabbalha minni, which means, oh Allah, I'm intending umrah, so make it easy for me and accept it from me. Why is umrah being mentioned here? I thought we were doing hajj. Does anyone know? What type of hajj is this person doing? This person is doing tamattu, right? If you're doing qiran, then you would actually change the dua slightly. It would be Allahumma inni uridu al-hajj wal-umrah fayassirhuma li wa taqabbalhuma minni. And you know the different dua books for hajj have that in there. So don't worry too much if you can't memorize it right now. So most people are doing tamattu though, because of which you'll recite this dua. Because in tamattu you'll do umrah first and then you'll do the hajj afterward. If you're doing qiran though, you're doing both at the same time essentially with the same ihram, which is why the dua will be slightly different, where you're making the intention of both and not just one. Now when it comes to the talbiyah, then this is the talbiyah, right? I'm sure we already know it, but this is what it looks like. And it's good to learn the translation as well if you don't already have that memorized, because the talbiyah is the best form of dhikr. When a person is in the state of ihram, then of course a person should be doing all different types of dhikr in terms of tasbihat, Quran and things of that sort. But the best dhikr you can do in ihram is the talbiyah. There's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ was asked regarding what's the best hajj or what's the best ihram. And one of the answers that he gave was the one in which talbiyah is recited the most. Right? So a person should try to recite it as often as they can. One of the rewards that's mentioned for the talbiyah is that when a person recites this talbiyah, then all the different creation from their right and their left, every stone, every tree, even the ground itself, they recite the talbiyah with that person, حَتَّى تَنْقَطِعَ الْأَرْض مِنْ هَا هُنَا وَهَا هُنَا, such that the whole earth is covered, that every single tree, stone, piece of dirt from the right and left will recite the talbiyah with him. And the muhaddithun mention that because you're the reason for these beings reciting the talbiyah, you also get the reward for them reciting it. So it's a very rewarding action. Men should recite it audibly, women should recite it quietly. It's okay to every now and then do it together as a group, but primarily it should be recited individually as much as possible. Some of the forbidden acts in ihram, as we mentioned before, perfume is something that is not okay. When it comes to perfume and fragrances, these things are not allowed. This would also then include, as we mentioned, soap, likewise shower gel, shampoo, things of that nature. It's a misconception that you can't look in the mirror when you're in the state of ihram. I don't know if anyone's heard that before, but that's not true. The truth behind it is that in the state of ihram, it's actually good to be disheveled. Right? To have sort of almost like a messy appearance. The idea is you're not supposed to be combing your hair and making sure that you look nice and things of that sort. Before you enter the state of ihram, that's fine, as we mentioned. You take a shower, you clip your nails and everything. But once you're in the state of ihram, part of it is that you're not caring about your appearance so much. It is still permissible, once again, to look in the mirror, but the truth behind the myth is that you're not supposed to be worrying so much about your appearance. It's mentioned here about covering the head, right? So covering of the head, like, it mentions the hats. So this applies not only to hats, but it can also apply, nowadays I've seen some people, they use those. So holding an umbrella is okay, but there's this contraption where you attach an umbrella to this apparatus that goes on your head. So it's like an umbrella hat. So something like that wouldn't be okay. That would be essentially the same as a hat. Likewise, when you're sleeping, you can't, some people have a habit of like putting a blanket over their selves when they go to sleep, but when you're in the state of ihram, you can't do that. That would be the same because you're covering your face or you'd be covering your head. Both of those things are not okay in the state of ihram. A person shouldn't be removing any sort of hair. As we mentioned, combing, plucking, trimming, any of the hair would not be okay. And wearing the Footwear, when it comes to gloves, men wouldn't be allowed to wear gloves because they're stitched in the form of the body. Females, it's better for them not to wear gloves, but it would be permissible. However, not for the males. When it comes to these ones we already covered. When it comes to the permissible acts in ihram, so a person, it's allowed to take a shower. You'll see some of the bathrooms there, like in Mina and Arafah, they have showers right on top of the toilets. So that's fine. In the sense that you're doing so to cool down, not so much to clean yourself up. So the idea is not to remove dirt, but rather just to cool down. That's okay. In fact, it's one of the sunnahs when a person is in Arafah to take a shower to cool down. Use unscented soap, that's perfectly fine. Likewise, hand sanitizer, that's unscented, would also be okay in the state of ihram. Wearing sunglasses, wearing a ring, hearing aid, having a watch, the money belt we spoke about, these things are all going to be permissible. Likewise, if there's any insect or pest that is either harmful or bothersome, then that's okay. If it's not harmful or bothersome, then a person should avoid killing even the insects if possible. But if someone does, then there wouldn't be a penalty for that. It's just better to avoid doing so. Okay, when it comes to entering the city of Mecca, then a person should do so in a humble way. Remember that it's not a sightseeing trip that you're taking selfies and posting things on Instagram and keeping everyone updated as far as your Hajj or Umrah trip is concerned. A person should be remembering the grandeur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remembering that this is the city of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he was born, where he spent the majority of his life, and this is a place where a lot of the major events happened in the seerah, the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum and things of that nature. So keeping those sort of things in mind. And when a person does arrive, they should ideally try to get checked in and everything first, and perhaps even take some rest. This is a general recommendation that oftentimes people overlook, that they just want to get out of the state of ihram as soon as possible, right? So they'll just try to leave everything at the hotel, maybe not even check in, just leave your bags there. We want to get out of ihram, so we're going to go and do umrah. But that may not be necessarily the correct mindset. As you see on the side as well, umrah can take many hours, right? And it can be quite tiring. So a person who has just gotten off of a long flight, you've got the whole stress of arriving on your mind, then it becomes a lot harder to then concentrate. And it becomes a lot harder to hold your temper and remain patient, right? So that's why it's generally recommended, if a person feels energy and they're okay, then that's fine. But if you can, take some rest first, despite the fact that you'll have to be in ihram for a little bit longer. But that way you can do your umrah with proper concentration and devotion without feeling very rushed. Right, when a person actually enters the Masjid al-Haram, then they should do so as they do with any masjid. Enter with the right foot, read the different du'as, send salawat to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One thing that is different though, is that when it comes to any other masjid, as long as it's not a disliked time, you're supposed to do tahiyyat al-masjid, right, where you pray 2 rak'ahs. But Masjid al-Haram is the one masjid where that's not the case, right? The ulama mentioned that in the haram, that tahiyyat al-masjid is the tawaf. Right? So instead of doing tahiyyat al-masjid, a person should do tawaf. If it's your first time there though, meaning that it's your first time on this trip, then you should first try to, before you even do tawaf, stop at some place where you can clearly see the Kaaba and make dua, because this is a time when dua is accepted. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase Masjid al-Haram in its honor. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect it. This is just of course a picture, as I'm sure we've all seen before. This is a diagram of the Kaaba itself. So there's 4 corners that are mentioned here. The black stone corner, otherwise known as Hajar Aswad. This is the Hajar Aswad, the black stone. You got the Iraqi corner, the Syrian corner, and the Yemeni corner. The green line that's over here is no longer there. I think they got rid of it at one point because too many people were just stopping and looking to see where is the green line. So people would be bumping into each other at that area. So instead what they have, let's see if I can find it. Yes, so there's these gold medallions. So you'll find gold writing across the Kaaba, but specifically the Hajar Aswad corner has these 4 gold medallions that you will not find on the other corners. So that's one way that you can identify it. Likewise, the column that's opposite of this corner has these green lights. So you can look to the right, you'll see the green lights. You look to the left and you'll see the 4 medallions on the Kaaba, that's how you know that this is the black stone corner. Why is that important? Because that's where you start your tawaf. You're going to start your tawaf at the Hajar Aswad corner, and once you've gone around and reached back here, now you've finished one round. This is the multazam, the door of the Kaaba. This will be significant. We'll talk about that later, inshaAllah. As for the preparation for the tawaf, this is one of the necessary parts of the Umrah and the Hajj. So right now we're talking about the tawaf for Umrah. The Hajj hasn't begun yet. This is the tawaf for Umrah. It is necessary, meaning that it's wajib to have wudu. We'll talk about later as far as if a person's wudu breaks while they're doing tawaf, what are they supposed to do? And as mentioned, you begin the tawaf at the Hajar Aswad. Since this is the Umrah tawaf, you will, as a male, uncover the right shoulder. So females don't uncover anything. The males will uncover their right shoulder. As mentioned, when a person wears the upper garment, you wear it as you would wear a shawl, where you have one end of it on one shoulder, one end of it on the other. When you do ittiba', when you do this uncovering of the right shoulder, then instead of having one end on the right shoulder, you'll put that under your arm, right? So that the right shoulder is exposed. The ittiba' should be done shortly before the tawaf. If the salah starts while you're doing a tawaf with ittiba', then you should cover your shoulder back up and then pray salah, and then once you're done, you continue your tawaf with your right shoulder uncovered. And when a person starts the Umrah tawaf, this is when you'll stop reciting talbiyah. You'll start it again when you go into the state of ihram for Hajj, but the talbiyah for Umrah ends when you begin the tawaf for Umrah. Now, how do you begin the tawaf? This, once again, is an integral part, a very important part that a person should try to remember and to learn. There's two things. There's istiqbal and there's istilam. So the istiqbal will only be done once. This is done in the beginning of the tawaf, where a person, they'll come in line with the Hajar Aswad and they'll face their body toward it. It's very similar to the takbir in the salah. So just like how in the salah we raise our hands with the palms facing toward the qibla, with the thumbs in line with our earlobes, that's exactly what you do, right? And you'll recite Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. After you do this, then you put your hands down to the sides, and this is once again done in the beginning of every tawaf that you do. The other thing is called istilam. So istilam is making some sort of contact with the Hajar Aswad. If a person can do it directly, then that's the ideal scenario, but that's almost impossible, right? To be able to actually touch the Hajar Aswad, to kiss the Hajar Aswad, which is why we know in the Sunnah as well that it's allowed to do it from a distance. And that's primarily the way that you will be doing it, is that after you've done the istiqbal, then you do istilam. So what is istilam? The easy way to visualize it and to learn it is that the reason you do istilam is because you can't touch the Hajar Aswad. So the idea is you make a motion as if you're touching the Hajar Aswad, and then you bring your fingers to your mouth, and then you kiss your hands, you kiss your fingers. Okay? Because if you were at the stone, then you would either kiss it directly or you would touch it and then kiss your hands. But since you can't touch it physically, you make a motion as if you're touching it, and then you kiss your hands. During the tawaf, you may hear people doing like the chef's kiss, okay? When they're getting very passionate, like, oh, I'm kissing the Hajar Aswad. But this is actually disliked to make a sound, right? When a person is kissing their fingers after touching the stone, then a noise should not be made. Yeah, due to the crowds, it's very difficult. And once again, this is something based in the Sunnah. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to Umar radiallahu ta'ala an in a narration where he said, Ya Umar, innaka rajulun qawi, that you're a strong man, la tuzahim ala al-hajar. Don't crowd around the hajar. Meaning that if there's space that's open, then you can go ahead and do it. But if there's not space, then don't become a nuisance for other people. Many people, unfortunately, just make it a point that I have to kiss the Hajar Aswad, I have to get close to it. But almost everyone who tries is going to harm someone in some way. And it's very difficult, right? People will be elbowing you, you'll be tempted to elbow them back. There's also members of the opposite gender there as well. They'll be bumping into you. So the idea is that it's a lot better to just do it from a distance as opposed to trying to fight your way to making it to the stone so that you can kiss it or so that you can touch it. Right, as was mentioned when it comes to the Hajj al-Aswad, the istilam, you do the istiqbal for the first tawaf, and then you do the istilam, you say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and kiss your hands. There's going to be a total of, he mentions 8 here, but there's technically going to be 9 in the Umrah tawaf. The 9th one is often forgotten. It's mentioned later in the slides. As for the tawaf itself, it'll have 8. 1 in the beginning and then 1 in the end. 1 in the beginning of every round, so you have 7, and then 1 at the very end, which makes it a total of 8 for the tawaf. As we'll get to once a person has prayed the 2 rakahs, there's a 9th istidam as well that people often forget. This is that same picture we were looking at earlier of the Hajj al-Aswad. After performing istidam, one will begin the tawaf. Right, so you do the istiqbal, which is similar to the takbir. Then you do your first istidam, which is motioning toward the Hajj al-Aswad, kissing your hands. Then you go toward the right, and you start walking. So in the first 3 rounds, when it comes to the Umrah tawaf, then the men do what's called ramal. What is ramal? He mentions here walking briskly. There's a little bit more to that, and similar to the istidam, if you remember the idea behind it, it becomes easier to realize how you're supposed to do it. So a little bit of the background when it comes to the ramal is that when the Prophet ﷺ came back to Mecca, when did the Umrah al-Qadha take place? Seerah students. What year? Huh? Very good, mashallah. Right, the 7th year. So Sulh Hudaybiyah, they tried to go, they were stopped, so they came back in the 7th year. Now the rumor had spread that the Muslims had become weak, because it was common that when people would move to Medina, due to its climate being different, the water being different, the vegetation being different, that people would get sick there. And in fact, many Sahaba did, such as Bilal radiallahu an, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an, to the point that it was thought that they would actually pass away. That's how sick they got. Right? So the rumor had spread that the Muslims are weak now. The Muslims are very weak. So the Prophet ﷺ heard of this rumor, and that's why he told the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala ajma'in to do ramal. So now you kind of understand the idea behind it, which will make it easier to understand how you're supposed to do it. The idea is to show your strength, right? So keep your chest out, sort of like sway your shoulders. As mentioned, you're going to walk briskly, meaning that you'll walk a little more quickly. Basically, show your strength. It's as if someone thinks that you're weak and you want to show them that, no, I'm not weak. So keeping that idea in mind, men will do ramal specifically just for the first 3 rounds, not for the whole 7 rounds of the tawaf, but the first 3. And this is a sunnah or recommended action, because of which it's okay if you have a female with you or multiple females that you're looking after, then it's okay to walk normally. Just try and do it as much as you can, right? Maybe if there's an opening, you do ramal for a little bit in one of the first 3 rounds, as much as you can. If that's not an issue, then yeah, you should try and do it for the entirety of the first 3 rounds. It's not running though, right? Even with the sa'i, as we'll get to, is not a full-on sprint, but you do jog when it comes to sa'i. The ramal is not a jog, right? You are walking briskly. It's more like speed walking, or even a little bit less than that. It's not a jog, and it's definitely not a sprint. A person is once again primarily trying to show their strength. And the rule is that ramal and ittiba will take place if there's sa'i after it. So right now we're talking about the Umrah tawaf, which has sa'i after it, which is why the men will do ittiba in this tawaf, and they'll do ramal in the first 3 rounds of this tawaf. But anytime you do a nafal tawaf, there's no ittiba, there's no ramal. You don't uncover the right shoulder, and likewise, all 7 rounds you just walk normally. This is another diagram of the Kaaba that shows the sequence as well. Another thing that comes up, some miscellaneous rulings when it comes to the tawaf, is that you need to walk around the hatim and not cut through. So if you're thinking I'm going to be slick and make a shortcut and go through here, then that wouldn't be valid. You won't be able to do it anyway, because there's usually a huge crowd there. There's people that are praying inside of there. That's even if it's open. Oftentimes the door will be closed. But you know, he did mention on the side, that's why we're talking about it, is that although technically, yes, praying inside here is similar to praying inside of the Kaaba, but when it comes to tawaf, you can't go from in here, you have to go from around the hatim. When a person is doing tawaf, try and recite Quran, dhikr, dua. The talbiyah, once again, is over at this point. So earlier, talbiyah was the most important dhikr, but once you begin the Umrah Tawaf, there is no more talbiyah until you start your Hajj. So instead of reciting talbiyah, you can recite Quran, you can do dhikr. You should try to avoid talking to others while you are doing your tawaf. Talking to Allah is okay, of course. A person should make dua. If you want, different people do different things where you have like Hizb al-Azam, for example. There's 7 days in there, Munajat Maqbool as well. These are dua books that there's certain duas for each day. So you could, for example, just read one day's dua repeatedly within that tawaf, because there's 7 tawafs, there's 7 days of the week. You could, for example, decide that I want to make a specific category of dua in each round. Like in the first round, you make dua for yourself. In the second round, you make dua for your family. Eventually, in the 7th round, you're making dua for the whole ummah. Maybe with one tawaf, you just recite the 3rd kalima the whole time. Because there's actually a hadith in Ibn Majah where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that man tafa bil-bayt sab'an wa la yatakallamu illa bi subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah muhiyat anhu 10 sayyi'at. That if a person does the 7 rounds of tawaf and the whole time they don't say anything other than the 3rd kalima, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will wipe away 10 sins from that person. They'll get 10 rewards. Their status will be increased by 10 ranks, and they'll be immersed in the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is something found in the hadith too, that a person tries to do maybe one tawaf of 7 rounds where they're only reciting the 3rd kalima and nothing else. It's okay to take a break if a person wants to drink some zamzam. But it is disliked to eat though, and a person should try their best not to disturb others in terms of their voice and obviously in terms of their physical presence as well. Don't push anyone, even if they're pushing you, even if they're elbowing you. That's part of the Hajj experience, you could say, that you endure those things patiently without retaliating. While performing the tawaf, one thing that is not mentioned on the side before we move on to this one is that you should try to not look at the Kaaba. It's not sinful, but when you're doing tawaf, it's from the adab of the tawaf that you don't look at the Kaaba. Instead, a person should lower their gaze similar to how they do in salah. And in the topic of lowering one's gaze, a person should be mindful. If they haven't been there before, then they may not know that it's unfortunately common for people to not guard their gazes in such situations, right? Shaitan is always present, and there are people of the opposite gender from all across the world, so a person may be tempted to look, and they may feel that it's innocent. Shaitan will convince a person like, oh, you're not having any lust. How could you have bad feelings? How could you have lustful feelings while you're in the haram? But no, it is unfortunately a thing that happens. So a person should be especially mindful when it comes to guarding their gaze in these sacred places. While performing the tawaf, if a person's wudu breaks, then what are you supposed to do? So it mentions here that you can pause the tawaf and continue from where you left off. Technically though, there is a little bit more detail here, that it depends on how many rounds you've done so far. So, if you've done less than 4 and your wudu breaks, then when you come back, it's better to start over again, but it's permissible to continue from where you left off. If you've done less than 4. If you've done 4 or more and your wudu breaks, then same thing, you can make wudu and come back. But it's actually better in this case to continue from where you left off as opposed to starting over again. You get it? So because there's 7 tawafs, 4 is the easy way to remember, that's the majority. So as long as you're less than 4, when you come back, it's better to start over again. But it is okay to continue from where you left off. And if you've done 4 or more, then it is better to continue from where you left off, but it would be permissible to start over again. When it comes to the other corners of the Kaaba, you will see people doing istilam of what's called Rukn Yamani, which is this corner over here. It's the corner that comes before the Hajar Aswad when you're doing tawaf, but that's not established in the Sunnah. What is established in the Sunnah is touching the Rukn Yamani. Okay? So that's why this opening is there in the kiswa, in the cloth of the Kaaba, so that you can touch it, because touching it is from the Sunnah. To either touch it with both hands or to touch it with only the right hand. It's not Sunnah to touch it with just the left hand, so a person should avoid that. But the Sunnah is only to touch it. This one doesn't have a concept of doing istidam from far away. Now once again, you'll see people doing it. You'll see people doing istidam of it from far away, just like how they do of the Hajar Aswad, but that's not from the Sunnah. That should be avoided With the Hajar Aswad, yeah, you can just, as we mentioned, you're walking by the Hajar Aswad, you can do istinam of it as you walk by. But for the Rukn Yamani, if you're close to it, then yes, go ahead and touch it. That's sunnah, it's a good thing to do. But if you're far away, there's no gesture that you do toward it. Yeah, there's no kissing of it either. And another dua that comes up is the dua of رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً, right? The famous dua that I'm sure we all know. There's a hadith that is in Ibn Majah that mentions وَكِّلَ بِهِ سَبْعُونَ مَلَكًا, that when it comes to the Rukn Yamani, the hadith mentions that there's 70 angels that have been assigned to the Rukn Yamani. فمن قال اللهم إني أسألك العفو والعافية في الدنيا والآخرة ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Whoever reads this dua, when they cross the Rukn Yamani, then these 70 angels, they make dua for that person. They say Ameen to that person's dua. So that's one other sunnah that a person can practice on, is that when they pass the Rukn Yamani, then they make the dua. If you can add Allahumma inni as'aluka al-'afwa wal-'afiyah fi ad-dunya wal-akhirah. If you don't know that part, then just Rabbana atina fi ad-dunya, that dua would also suffice. Okay, how do we complete the tawaf? The tawaf is completed when you do istiram of the Hajar Aswad at the end of the 7th round. This is your 8th istiram. Once again, there's one istiram in the beginning of each round, and then this is the 8th one that happens at the end of the 7th. Now it's wajib to pray 2 rak'ahs at this point. So a person should pray 2 rak'ahs. Ideally, this is done behind the Maqam Ibrahim. So Maqam Ibrahim is this represented here in the diagram. This is the enclosing around the stone that Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he was constructing the Kaaba with his son Ismail alayhi salam, then in order to get to the higher parts of the Kaaba, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down this stone that he would then stand on. And then that stone would float up so that he could place the bricks on the higher portions. So the footprint of Ibrahim alayhi salam is in that stone. And that stone is once again inside of this structure over here. So a person should, when they are doing the 2 wajib rak'ahs after the tawaf, they should try and pray them behind the Maqam Ibrahim, but you don't have to. You could do it anywhere inside of the haram. And in fact, if you forget, they do still remain wajib. So if a person is not in the haram when they remember, you can technically do the 2 rak'ahs anywhere. If it's a disliked time though, meaning that it's sunrise, sunset, or the zawal time, the zenith, then a person shouldn't pray those 2 rak'ahs during that time. Now the next step is the sa'i. So the sa'i is wajib in the umrah. It's done after the tawaf, and sa'i is walking between Safa and Marwa. And there's a certain part where you jog as well. Now I think, yeah, here's the 9th istiram that we're talking about. Okay, so this is the one that's often overlooked. After you do the 2 tawafs, after you do the 2 rak'ahs after your tawaf, the 2 wajib rak'ahs, then when you're walking from Maqam Ibrahim to the mas'a is where you do sa'i, then you're going to cross the Hajar Aswad one more time. So when you cross the Hajar Aswad, you face it now and do istiram for a 9th time. This will be the 9th istiram that a person should be doing. Then they'll exit the masjid and go toward the mas'a. So this is the mas'a. This is where you do tawaf. This is called the mataf. And then this is the place where sa'i is done. This is what it looked like while construction was going on there. And how does a person do the sa'i? So the first thing is that you go to Safa first. So when you walk in there, it should be on the right side, right? Because if you're coming from the masjid, then it'll be on your right. Because you can enter from this side too, technically. That's usually used for exits though. So when you're coming from the mataf area, then Safa will be on your right. So you want to make sure you start at Safa as opposed to Marwa. So when you walk into this area, you will go to the right. It's better to try and do it on the bottom floor. There is some difference of opinion. Will your sa'i count if you do it on any of the other floors? Technically it's valid, but because of that difference of opinion, ideally you should try and do it on the bottom floor of the mas'a. So the first thing you do is you go to Safa. So there'll be a sign there that says Safa starts. So you want to pass this sign And once you've passed that sign, then you face toward the Qibla. You face toward the Kaaba, which you might be able to see actually. On Marwa, you can't really see it, but on Safa, there are some pillars there that you might be able to see in between. And you make dua. This is a time when the Prophet ﷺ would make dua, so it's time of acceptance. First you say Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, and then you make dua. Once you have done so, meaning you've made the dua, that's when you head toward Marwa. And there's these green lights that will be above that are shining on the ground as well. So when you get to the green lights, that's when then you sprint. Right? The reason being that we know, of course, Hajar alayhi salam, the whole story where she was looking for water or for anyone to help her when her son Ismail alayhi salam was on the brink of dehydration. So at that time, the mountains were quite larger. They're almost like hills now, you could say, where they're not that large, but due to people, climbing on them over the years, they've eroded to the point that they're a lot smaller than they were before. So at the time, the mountains were so large that the only flat area was between these two green sticks that are here. Those are not actual sticks, they're not there, by the way, but they're represented by lights now. The green lights, that's the area where it was flat. So that's the area where she ran. Because before she was coming down the mountain, so it would be difficult for her to run. But when she got to the bottom, that's when then she would sprint. So that's why we also, not sprint, but that's when a person will jog during that point. Yeah, so that's what's mentioned over here. Women don't run between the two green lights at the mas'a. A person might ask, why is it that Hajar alayhi salam ran, but women are not supposed to run? That has to do with because at the time, she was in a desperate situation, that's why she was running. But it behoves modesty that a woman doesn't run, even in this situation. So that's why the men will jog at that point, but the women will just continue to walk normally. When a person reaches Marwa, that means you've done one lap. Right? So from Safa to Marwa, that's one lap. Some people have the misconception or they forget and they'll go from Safa to Marwa and then back to Safa and count that as one. But that's not actually the case, right? You're going to end up doing double what you need to do. So keep that in mind. In fact, Mufti Abdul Rahman Mangira, I was listening to a lecture of his where he mentioned that a friend of his, he thought that one round would be if you do it 7 times, right? Because I guess maybe he was thinking of how the tawaf is, where with the tawaf you go around 7 times and then that equals 1. So that person ended up doing 7 times 7. So 49 rounds of the going back and forth from Safa to Marwa. So that's not the case. You just have to do it 7 times, not there and back, but rather from Safa to Marwa is 1, from Marwa to Safa is 2, and so on and so forth. You should end up at Marwa because it's an odd number. If you find yourself ending at Safa, then you know that you messed up, right? Because it's an odd number, so you should be ending at Marwa because you started at Safa. That was the picture of Safa. This is now a picture of Marwa. And then once you've now reached Marwa, at the end of your 7th round, this is also a time where a person should make dua. So basically on Marwa, you do the same thing you do on Safa, that you go past the sign that says Marwa begins or Safa begins, you face toward the Qibla and then you make dua. And then you keep on doing that until you do a full 7 times. And now, this is another oft forgotten action, is to perform 2 rak'ahs, not in the mas'a, but in the masjid. So some people don't pray it at all, and some people who do, they pray it in the mas'a itself. You'll even see people that are praying within the mas'a itself. But these 2 rak'ahs, it's actually mustahab not to pray them in the mas'a, but the hadith mentions how they should be prayed in the masjid as opposed to the mas'a area. Now when it comes to tawaf, you have to have wudu. When it comes to sa'i, it's better to have wudu, but you don't have to. So it's good if you do, but if you don't, that's fine. You wouldn't have to give a penalty for that. Although once again, it is better, a person should do it, and if your wudu breaks, it's better to make it and then continue from where you left off. Similar to the tawaf, you make dhikr, you make dua, and similar to tawaf, if salah starts, or you just need to take a break, it's okay to continue from where you left off. Now, as far as the shaving is concerned, a person can either shave their hair or they can trim it. But the Prophet ﷺ made dua of mercy for those who shave their hair 3 times, and for those that trim, he only made dua once So you could say the reward for shaving, some have said based on the hadith then, is that it's 3 times more than the one who trims their hair, so they should try to do that. If they are going to trim their hair though, then the minimum is 1 inch from a quarter of the head. Right, so if a person has long hair, for females as well, then the easy way would then be that if you want to just do the minimum, which is okay, the sunnah is to do 1 inch from the whole head, but if you just do 1 inch from 25%, then that's okay. Right, so just 1 fingertip, you could say. About 1 fingertip, a person would just, if they're doing the whole head, then maybe for those with longer hair, like females, divide the hair into 3 parts, and then just 1 inch or a fingertip from each part of those hairs. But technically, if you just did from the back, because that would equal 25% or 1/4, that would suffice for the minimum. Now, once a person shaves their head or cuts their hair, now their umrah is complete. Right? Once again, when it comes to the females, I would say that book that I recommended earlier, that'll help you in seeing what things are different for females as opposed to males. So we'll skip this section. And for the females who are listening, can just check out that kitab, inshallah. It has a lot more detail than what's mentioned here. And this is the point at which the umrah ends. So all the different prohibitions are over, and the person will now be free from the prohibitions of ihram. And a person now, a question that comes up is, for this time, should we be doing multiple umrahs, or should we do multiple nafil tawafs? Right, so it's a common question that's asked. But the sunnah would dictate that nafil tawafs would be better at this time compared to doing multiple umrahs. So this is more of like a modern trend where people will try and do as many umrahs as possible by going to Masjid Aisha, which is outside of the haram in Tan'im, and then just coming back and forth doing multiple umrahs. But it's actually better if a person can to do multiple nafil tawafs as opposed to doing multiple umrahs. And at this point, a person is now free of all the prohibitions. So all the different things we mentioned earlier, as far as wearing perfume, cutting your nails, cutting your hair, having relations, all these things are okay at this stage. Okay, so the next section has to do with the Hajj guide. One thing before we move on, when it comes to questions, if you noticed, I haven't been really taking questions, the reason being that, for the sake of time, but there is a Slido. Right? So if anyone wants to ask questions, you can ask on there. We have a Mufti who's on standby, mashallah, who's there to answer your questions. They'll either be answered during the presentation live, or inshallah, if there's anything that's not answered live, then it'll get answered afterward. So if you go to slido.com, we will put the QR code at the end as well, but a person could go there now as well if they want to. The code is very easy. It's just 3 zeros and 3 ones. 3 zeros and 3 ones. That's your Slido code in case you want to ask questions for anyone who's here or anyone who's listening online. This part is more so covered in the spiritual aspect of it. So we'll just get into this slide over here. So before even the 8th, we would say the 7th. So you've done your umrah, you're in that stage in between the umrah and the hajj. When you're halal, you can do whatever actions you want to do as far as things that are prohibited in the ihram, those are no longer there. Now, one thing is that because you're doing tamattu', most people do tamattu', before you enter your state of ihram, actually not before, after you've entered your state of ihram for hajj, you want to try and do your sa'i now, so that you don't have to do it later. Because on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, the main tawaf is called tawaf al-ziyarah, and you need to do at least 1 sa'i in your hajj while you're in the state of ihram for hajj. So to make things easier, what could be done is that you enter your state of ihram for hajj before you go on the 8th, which is going to be discussed over here. You enter the state of ihram, you do a nafil tawaf, and then you do sa'i, because you can't do sa'i on its own. So in order to do the sa'i for your hajj now, as opposed to having to do it on the 10th when there's a lot more rush, then you can just do it now, which once again is quite simple. The main thing you just need to remember is that you need to enter into the state of ihram before you do it. So because you're going to be leaving for Hajj and the different actions of Hajj after sunrise, then maybe you can do this the night before. So on the 8th, after sunrise is when you leave for Mina. So sometime before that, whether it's like early morning, before Fajr, that's when most people would do it, is before Fajr. You do your nafil tawaf and you do your sa'i right now so that you don't have to worry about doing it later. This only works though, this is for someone who's doing tamattu, right? Which we said is the most common one that people do. Then if you're doing tamattu, you can do your hajj sa'i now as opposed to doing it later. All right, it's good to enter the state of ihram in the masjid. You can technically do it from your hotel room if you want, but what might be better is that you just wear the clothing when you're in the hotel room, and then when you go to the masjid, you can enter the state of ihram for hajj, do your nafil tawaf and your sa'i for hajj, and then fajr salah will be prayed in Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, and then it's sunnah to once again wait until sunrise to leave. You could go before sunrise as well, but that would technically be against the sunnah. There wouldn't be any penalty or anything for something like that. So on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, a person will go to Mina, as we mentioned, after sunrise. And the sunnah is that you just stay there. So on the 8th, that's pretty much all you do, is that you go to Mina and you stay there. This is what Mina looks like. There's different signs that show you where the boundary begins, and these are the different tents that people are staying in. As you can see, the tents look almost exactly the same. So from a practical perspective, it's good that maybe once you get to your tent, that you drop a pin, right, on your phone, that you use your Apple Maps or Google Maps, whatever the case is, and you drop a pin so that you don't forget where you're staying, okay? Because that's a common thing that happens. A lot of people get lost in Mina because of how all the tents pretty much look the same. The bathrooms there are not necessarily the best. That's another sort of issue that comes up, because of which, unfortunately, it's usually females, but I guess it could happen to a guy as well, is that they just stop drinking water so that they don't have to use the bathroom. So as you can imagine, that's not a good idea, right? Especially in the summer months, it's very hot, it's very easy for a person to get dehydrated. One of my teachers mentioned that, yeah, pretty much every year there's always at least one female that they hear of that passed out, right? Not passed away, but passed out due to dehydration. So it's not that big of a deal, right? Plug your nose if you have to, do whatever you have to do. It's better to stay hydrated than to have some sort of medical issue that a person needs to worry about. And then, yeah, another tip, I guess, when it comes to the bathrooms is that around the salah times, that's when they're the most crowded. So there are going to be long lines pretty much throughout the day, but especially at salah times. So maybe try to use the restroom outside of the salah times so that you don't have as much of a line that you need to wait in. And then a person, while they're in Mina, unfortunately, there's a lot of like socializing that happens there, a lot of time that gets wasted. But instead, a person should try their best to spend your time in worship, reading Quran, engaging in dhikr. Right? One of the sunnahs as well, we know that the Prophet ﷺ, when he first was commissioned with prophethood, then before he migrated to Medina, then he would actually go to Mina during the days of Hajj, and he would be giving da'wah. That's where then he met the Ansar. So this is also one sunnah that a person can bring to life, is that they go around and they see anyone who they feel like would be receptive to listening. They can share a short reminder, whatever the case may be. But as far as like worldly things that, oh, where are you from? What job do you do? How much money do you make? The things like that are not important, a person should avoid the idle chit-chat that normally a person might be doing. Okay, so on the 8th, as was mentioned, you pretty much just pray the different salahs that are there, the Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha. And then on the 9th, you pray Fajr in Mina as well. Then also on the 9th, once you're done with Fajr, because the takbirat have begun. So this is something that you do even when you don't go for Hajj, is that from the 9th Fajr onward, it's wajib to recite the takbirat al-tashriq, which I'm sure we all know, but they're also mentioned over here. This is wajib for both men and women. Men will recite audibly, women will recite to themselves, and this is done after every fard prayer. You perform Fajr at Mina. After sunrise, you go to Arafah. And Arafah is where then it's wajib to stay there from midday until sunset. There's these different signs that say that Arafah begins here, Arafah ends here. So a person needs to stay within those boundaries during the time from midday until sunset. And Arafah is an extremely important part of the Hajj. In fact, the hadith mentions that Al-Hajju Arafah, the Hajj is Arafah. So it's a very important time. Unfortunately, a lot of people do end up wasting that time where they'll be sleeping or they'll be talking, similar to what you mentioned in Mina. I remember in particular, my teacher, Mufti Abrar, Hafidhullah, he was our group scholar when we went for Hajj. And I still remember that he himself, mashallah, was outside making dua the whole time. When he came back for salah, he saw that almost everyone in our group was either like lying down or talking. And for anyone who knows him, his mizaj is very soft, very lenient. But this is one time that I saw that he was upset. That this is your Hajj. And this is the day of Arafah. And you're just wasting the time talking, laying down. Go and make dua. Right? So it's very important. Arafah is the time the Prophet ﷺ himself, pretty much from the time that he prayed Asr right after Zohar, because as we'll see, you combine both of the prayers, all the way until sunset, he was pretty much making dua the entire time, standing outside, making dua. So a person should realize, like, this is what you came for. That's one thing he was saying, is that this is literally what you came for, is to get your duas accepted, and this is one of the main times for acceptance of duas. So a person should not waste any time when they're in Arafah, and try their best to remain engaged in dhikr and dua. Ideally, if a person can, is to stand outside. You can use an umbrella or something to protect yourself from the sun. But the point being that ideally, if you can, you're supposed to stand and make dua outside. If not standing outside, then standing inside of your tent making dua. If not standing, then at least sitting down and making dua. That should be the main thing that you're doing while you are in Arafah. There's also the combining of Zohar and Asr. So there's difference of opinion amongst the madhahib. But according to the Hanafi madhab, I'm assuming most of us are Hanafi, then you only combine Zohar and Asr if you're praying behind the Imam in Masjid Namira. So there's a masjid there called Masjid Namira, which may or may not be close to your tent. So most likely you'll actually be praying in your tent, because of which you do not combine Zohar and Asr. If you're not praying behind the Imam in Masjid Namira, you'll pray Zohar in its time, and then you'll pray Asr when its time arrives. If you are close to Masjid Namira and you can make it there for Salah, then that's perfectly fine. You'll pray Zohar, and then right after that the Imam will pray Asr, so you can join them for that as well. There's a mountain there, which, as you can see, mashallah, this is covered with Hujjaj. This is called Jabal Rahmah. So it's not a sunnah to climb the mountain, but to be near the mountain. The Prophet ﷺ stood near this mountain when he was making dua in the plains of Arafah. So it's good to stand near it. Many people make it a point to try and climb it, get to the top, touch the big rock that's up there. But that's not a sunnah. The best thing is that a person just stands near there and makes dua. And if it's far away from your tent, it's not that big of a deal. You don't need to go out of your way to try and make dua there. Anywhere in Arafah would be fine. Now when sunset happens, a person should leave as soon as they can for Muzdalifah. This obviously could depend on when your bus comes and things of that sort. But the point being that you should try to leave as soon as you can. And Maghrib shouldn't be prayed. This is maybe like the one situation where a person will just allow the time of the Salah to go by without praying, and that is once again in the travel from Arafah to Muzdalifah, that you don't pray Maghrib in Arafah, nor do you pray on the way to Muzdalifah. You wait until you get to Muzdalifah, and then you pray Maghrib and Isha together. So this one, it doesn't matter where you're praying. With Arafah, Zohar and Asr you only combine if you're praying behind the Imam in Masjid Namira, but when it comes to Muzdalifah and Maghrib and Isha, even if you're praying by yourself, most likely you'll pray with your group, anyone who's there, but you're going to combine Maghrib and Isha. The sunnahs of Maghrib you won't pray in between, rather you pray the sunnahs of Maghrib after you've prayed the Isha prayer. These are some of the pictures of Muzdalifah. Muzdalifah is not like Arafah and Mina in the sense that there's no tents, right? So as you can see, it's just open air out here with no tents. And you are going to spend the night there as well. So a person oftentimes will bring like a sleeping bag or some sort of mat, which oftentimes you just keep it inexpensive because as we'll get to, the longest walk that takes place is after Muzdalifah when you're walking to the jamarat, where you pelt the pillars with the stones. So because of that, many people leave their sleeping bags or their sleeping mats behind in Muzdalifah. So that's something to keep in mind when you're purchasing your supplies, that if you're okay with that, maybe just buy a cheaper one so that you can just leave it there as opposed to having to carry it back with you. Yeah, as was mentioned, you're going to pray Maghrib and Isha together, and then the sunnahs will be prayed along with the sunnahs of Isha and the witr salah after you finish the Isha prayer. In Muzdalifah, the main thing over here is staying the night as well as collecting the pebbles. So there's going to be the stoning of the pillars in the next few days. So this is where you get the pebbles from. Technically, you can get them from anywhere, not just anywhere in the haram, but anywhere in the world, right? I've seen people with like Home Depot bags in their suitcases at the airport specifically for this purpose. It is recommended though, it's better to use the pillars that are in Muzdalifah, the pebbles, and you can take a Ziploc or a plastic bottle or something and gather them in there. You need 49 at least, maybe take some extras, and if you are going to stay on the 13th as well, which we're going to talk about, then you'll need a total of 70, but once again, you should probably have some extra ones as well that we already spoke about. Now, once you've stayed the night in Muzdalifah, that's where then, after Fajr, a couple minutes before sunrise, you should leave. A lot of people will start to leave right after Fajr, but the sunnah is to wait until a couple minutes before sunrise and leave at that time. So a person shouldn't leave before that, but it's still valid as long as you don't leave before Fajr. Staying after Fajr is wajib, so don't leave before that. And ideally you should wait until a little bit before sunrise before you go. Now it's the 10th of Dhul Hijjah. So these four major acts, which the Arabic acronym is Ranhat. It's not a real word, but that's how you could easily remember it, is Ranhat, Rami, Nahar, Halq, and Tawaf. In English, the easy acronym to remember is the word past: pelting, animal sacrifice, shaving, and Tawaf al-Ziyarah. So these are the four major acts that are done on this day, and they should be done in order. So the first thing is the Rami, which are the three tall pillars that are in Mina. So they're called Aqaba, Wusta, and Sughra, which is the large one, the Kubra, the Wusta is the middle one, and Sughra is the small one. There's this common misconception that these pillars are literally shaitan, so like throw the pebbles as hard as you can. Shaitan, kumarna bhai, shaitan. You know, it's like shaitan's here, we gotta hit shaitan. But that's not the reality. The reality is that these are more so representative. They represent the places where shaitan appeared in front of Ibrahim alayhi salam, because Ibrahim alayhi salam, as we know the story we hear every year, at least once a year, that he was going to sacrifice his son. So when he was going to sacrifice his son, then at three different places shaitan appeared, so he threw stones at him. So that's what we are mimicking, but shaitan isn't literally like trapped inside of the pillars. So keep that in mind. So this is Sughra, Wusta, and Kubra. So on the first day, meaning on the 10th, you're only going to do Kubra. So you don't stone the first pillar nor the second pillar. You'll just keep on walking past these until you get to the third one. And the sunnah is to have Makkah on your left and Mina on your right. So that's why then, when you are walking up to the pillar, as opposed you see there's people on the right and people on the left, you want to try and go left. Because that is what's mentioned in the hadith, is that the Prophet ﷺ, he was facing toward the pillar with Mina on his right and Makkah on his left. So that's why then when you walk up to the pillar, you want to go left instead of going right. Another tip is that most people crowd around this area, that's the closer side, but the far side usually has less people. In this picture, there's people all over the place, but usually the far side has less people. So when you're walking up to the pillar, like you're coming from over here, so instead of just gathering in this area here, try and go around and then come back so that you're on the far side, because there's generally going to be less people on that side. So the main thing to keep in mind over here is to get the pillar across the wall. Is there a picture? Yeah, so this wall over here, you don't need to necessarily hit the pillar. As long as you get it across the wall, then you're fine. You want to throw them one by one. If you throw all 7 of them at the same time, that just counts as one throw. So don't do that because you'll run out of rocks. Make sure to just throw one at a time. It's sunnah to say Allahu Akbar with every throw. And once again, you just need to get it across that wall. When it comes to making dua, you don't make, if there's a stoning that's coming after, then you'll stop and make dua. So on the first day, because you're only doing the last one, you don't make dua after the stoning. You'll make dua on the 11th and the 12th, but not on the 10th. On the 10th, you just do the last one, and then you continue without stopping and making dua. The timings, inshallah, you can just check that on the slides later. It's not anything too, this is pretty self-explanatory. When it comes to the animal slaughter, this is something that you generally won't be doing yourself. If you already signed up for it when you got your nusuk package, then you don't really need to worry about it. If you didn't, then there's different ways to go about it. If you know someone who's there, there's also a brother I know who started a website. It's called hajsolutions.com. So hajsolutions.com is good in the sense that you can maintain the tartib that we spoke about earlier. Because when you do it through nusuk, they may or may not maintain the tartib, which is fine. There are fatwa that mention that. Because it's not within your control, it's okay. But generally, it is considered wajib to do the animal sacrifice after the rami and not before it. So hajsolutions.com can help you in maintaining that tartib if you want to go that way. The shaving we spoke about when we went over the Umrah section. Once a person has shaved their head or trimmed it, everything becomes okay except for relations. So you can now cut your hair and all those things, but relations is the only thing you can't do. And then there's tawaf al-ziyarah. So ideally you should do it on the 10th, as that is the sunnah. But as long as you do it anytime between the 10th and the 12th, then it will be valid and there's no penalty for it. It's preferable to do the tawaf al-ziyarah after the halq, but technically you don't have to do the tawaf al-ziyarah in order. The first three things on that list that we mentioned, those have to be in order. But when it comes to the tawaf al-ziyarah, you could do it first, you could do it last, you could do it in the middle. But ideally it should be done at last, after you've done the halq. And now once you've done the tawaf al-ziyarah, a person can have relations with their spouse. But up until tawaf al-ziyarah, they won't be allowed to be intimate with their spouse. This one as well, that's specific to women. The book that I recommended, all the details can be found in there. The sa'i, we spoke about this, that ideally you would have done this already on the night before the 8th of Dhul Hijjah. But if you haven't done the sa'i at that time, then this is when you would do your sa'i for Hajj as well. And once you've done your tawaf al-ziyarah, then all of the different prohibitions are uplifted. They no longer apply. A person can wear normal clothes and do whatever else they can do, including having relations with one's spouse. The sunnah is to spend the next few nights in Mina. Okay, if a person doesn't, then technically your Hajj still counts. If you spend the night in Makkah, your Hajj would still count, but it is considered disliked. So the sunnah is to spend the night in Mina. On the 11th, it's very easy. The only thing you do is the Rami. The difference though is, with this one and the 10th, is that you do Rami of all three Jamarat. Before it was just the largest one, but on the 11th you'll do the stoning of all three Jamarat, and this is wajib, so a person has to do it. If someone's very weak or handicapped or something, then it is okay to send someone to do it on your behalf, but that's only if a person has a strong excuse. The timings, once again, you can check out later. They're pretty self-explanatory. And the 12th is exactly the same as the 11th. Now, if a person stays the 13th, meaning that if one doesn't leave Mina and stays there until Subh Sadiq on the 13th, then you have to now, it's now wajib for you to do Rami on the 13th. If you leave before that though, then that's okay. You can leave early, there's nothing wrong with that, but technically the sunnah is to stay. It's likely that your tent would have been dismantled at this point, but most people leave. So there might be other tents that are still there that aren't yours that they might let you use. So a person could potentially act on this sunnah, but it may be difficult, so just keep that in mind, that it might just be easier to live on the 12th, and there's no dislike or sin for that. The timings, once again, you can check out on the slides later, which are available online. And then you leave Mina and you go back to Makkah at this point. The only last thing is the Tawaf al-Wada'. So this is wajib. There is a misconception that once you've done the Tawaf al-Wada', you can't do any shopping or anything like that. If you do any shopping, then your Tawaf al-Wada' is invalidated. You have to start over. So that's not true. The truth to it though is that you should preferably try to make it your last action. It doesn't have to be, but preferably you should try to make it your last action. After tawaf al-wada, a person can still enter the masjid, you can still even do tawaf, you can pray salah, you could even do umrah if you want. So it's not like it has to be the absolute last thing that you do. Now when it comes to the jinayat, this is something that we wouldn't have time to go over anyway. And I was already planning that this is a very useful tool that I came across that basically summarizes all of the different jinayat, the penalties, the violations you could say, and what are the penalties for them. So you could find this at this Telegram channel right there. So t.me/almunir info. So this is a very beneficial infographic / chart that I would highly recommend that you use. It pretty much summarizes it. The reason why I don't need to go over every single one is because most likely you won't need to do any of these. But in case a person realizes that they've done one of the violations, then you can easily see what the penalty would be in your respective situation. And I think that is pretty much it. Yeah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant all of you Hajj Mabrur. Please remember me in your du'as. Unfortunately, I won't be able to come this year. So one of the main reasons why I agreed to do this seminar is to hopefully get the du'as of all the Hujjaj. So please make du'a for me, for my family, for Dar es-Salaam, for all the teachers and patrons of Dar es-Salaam, for all the Muslims across the world, especially our brothers and sisters in Gaza and those that are suffering throughout the world. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين جزاكم خيرا.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم ألهمنا مراشد أمورنا وأعيذنا من شرور أنفسنا أما بعد. As I know, it's quite late. Isha Salah is quite late, so inshallah the intention is not to drag this on for a long time, but rather have a short mudhakara between inshallah 10 to 20 minutes, inshallah. Normally also there's the habit where we recite Surah Al-Kahf. We just recently started as for the same purposes for protection, as we can see in this narration. So inshallah we'll do it perhaps at the end of the discussion, the mudhakara, inshallah. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about, there's various different ayat in the Quran about Hajj. Many of them we've heard. So Allah, one of them, Al-Hajju Ashhurun Ma'lumat, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the Hajj will take place in their specific months for Hajj. And the ayah continues, فَمَنْ فَرَضَ فِيهِنَّ الْحَجَّ فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ يَعْلَمْهُ اللَّهُ وَتَزَوَّدُوا فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى وَاتَّقُونِ يَا أُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. So I would like to, inshallah, speak around this ayah. When going for Hajj, for those who have the opportunity to go, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant every one of us the ability to do so. This is indeed a great honor from the side of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Previously it was such that many of us in America, we got to go whenever we wanted to. There was no real limit per se of individuals who if they wanted to go, they would all able to go. And at the same time, there was so much convenience. And when we would travel to other parts in the world, we heard how difficult it was, that some people have a waiting list for 6 years, 5 years, some longer than that. Some are only allowed to go after the age of 50, and so on and so forth. And Wallahu A'lam, now we are in such a time, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alleviate all of us of this difficulty, but we're in such a time where we are now facing something very similar. That it's very real for us now to understand that it's not really whether we want to go, but rather it's when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts us to come. So when a person gets the invitation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he is accepted to go for Hajj, then there are a few things that we should keep in mind. The first thing that we should keep in mind is that when we go for Hajj, our intention should be such that we are doing this action solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Only for the sake of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ. Complete the hajj and the umrah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah mentions, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ. That this is the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon mankind, that they perform hajj for His sake. So you may wonder that, I'm spending thousands of dollars for the sake of hajj. I'm leaving my family, I'm leaving all my comforts. Why in the heavens world would I do this for any other reason besides for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? But sometimes our attention is diverted to other things. When we are on the journey, we have to constantly take stock of our intentions. We have to review our intentions before we go. Before we go, many of us, mashallah, we have the sincere, pure intention. But when you reach there, then you see all the different opportunities to go shopping. Then you have such a lavish, wonderful hotel to stay in. Then you realize there's so many different types of cuisines that we can, try out. And so a person's intention begins to change, or his attention diverts to other things. Whereas we should primarily be going solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shopping should not be a priority on our list. It's not something that we are intentionally going to seek out. Trying other cuisines, it should not be a priority on the list. The main priority is to go solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fulfill this task, this obligation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has obligated us to do. I was listening to Shaykh Hussein Sattar, Hafidhahullah. He had a whole program today. So it was a very beautiful, wonderful lecture. One of the advices that he gave today, he said that if there was someone who had cancer, may Allah protect all of us and grant all those who have it shifa. But if such a person was diagnosed and he was told that your only cure is for you to go to New York or to go to another state, then he understands that he's sick, he understands that he's dying, and he needs to get cured. So his only intention is going to be to go to that area to get the treatment so that he can get better. He's not going to worry about everything else. Other people who are maybe not sick, they will marvel over the fact that, oh, subhanAllah, now we have the opportunity to go see this wonderful city. We have the opportunity to go and experience that type of a life. We have the opportunity to go shopping and to see so many people and use the different forms of public transportation that are available, so on and so forth. It's a different experience that they can look forward to. But if you mention all of that to this person who's sick, he doesn't even care. To him, it's, I need to get here so that I can get cured. And he said, subhanAllah, our state should be similar to that individual. That when we are going for hajj, then we should ponder over the fact, we should all reflect over our lives. And if we do reflect over our lives, then we realize, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us, we've been living, for the vast majority of us, or rather I speak on behalf of myself and others like myself, that we've been living quite a pathetic life when it comes to obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Are we truly obeying Him as He ought to be obeyed? Are we worshipping as He ought to be worshipped? Are we fearing Him as He ought to be feared? Or are we constantly finding shortcuts and we're constantly disappointing our Creator? We've reached such a state, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, but our hearts are so dead. We have so many different shortcomings in our obligations to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our souls are starving, and even the brief resuscitation that Ramadan provides barely keeps us alive. SubhanAllah. It's a brief moment of perhaps a revival, but then it's so short-lived. It almost ends just as quickly as it started. So we are very sick. And we need to internalize this, we need to feel utmost remorse, and we need to understand what an opportunity we have at our doorstep for those who are accepted for this journey. We ought to be extremely, extremely grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And going with this intention that I am going solely to please my Allah, solely to reconnect my creationship, my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentioned in a hadith, مَنْ حَجَّ لِلَّهِ فَلَمْ يَرْفُثْ وَلَمْ يَفْسُقْ رَجَعَ كَيَوْمٍ وَلَدَتْهُ أُمُّهُ. Or kama qala Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that person who goes and he performs hajj solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he protects himself from sin, protects himself from arguments, and then he will return like the day that his mother gave birth to him, meaning completely cleansed of all sins. Which one of us does not wish for an opportunity to restart our lives? It's a completely fresh new slate. This is such a great honor indeed. Along with that, it's an opportunity to attain Jannah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has mentioned, Al-Hajjul Mabrur laysa lahu jaza'un illa al-Jannah. That an accepted Hajj is one that there is no other reward except for paradise. So imagine, subhanAllah, another thing Shaykh Hussein mentioned is, we could have been living our entire lives as sinful servants of Allah, drowning in sin. And in just a few days, we can have a completely fresh new slate, and we can be considered, inshallah, amongst the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we spend this time properly, if we go truly for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's one chance, it's one opportunity to completely change our lives. Before, maybe many of us were such that we thought we will have different opportunities to go again and again and again. But nowadays, we don't know. I mean, I myself, I've been trying for the past 3-4 years, subhanAllah. And it's almost like a lottery. It's like, it doesn't matter how much wealth you have, it doesn't matter. It's like, so to say, like the luck of the draw. Like, it depends on, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined for you to go, you will go. But you can't just get a spot. It doesn't work like that anymore. This is your one chance. We don't know when it's going to happen again. So this is this is the type of mindset that we should go with. That we are doing this solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, you're a guest of Allah. If those opportunities present themselves, then you can maximize on that. But it shouldn't be a priority. We're going there. There will be opportunities to purchase different things, maybe Islamic apparel that is cheaper and it's also better quality and it's easily available, and maybe a person wants to start dressing themselves more in accordance to the sunnah. It's a good opportunity. Definitely there are there's different justifications, of course. There are many noble intentions, but then again, it should not become a priority. If it happens, by the way, and we're able to try different cuisines and also benefit from the different amenities that we have, then alhamdulillah. We are essentially the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has called. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of His guests. The second thing that we should reflect on is that we should constantly reflect on every stage, every scenario that we are faced with, and every stage of the Hajj. And when we do this, inshallah, we will have a completely different experience. It will be a completely revolutionary experience. What do I mean by this? Well, especially for the men, when we are going to be going there for Hajj, we are going to be dressed in the ihram, like the formal attire for ihram for men, is that we will be dressed in something very similar to a kafan, very similar to the shroud that we will be buried in. Then we ought to use that time to reflect on the reality of this world and the insignificance of this world. That we are also, a time is going to come wherein we are going to pass away. And subhanAllah, it's a time to reflect on whether we have prepared for that day or not. When it comes to Surah Al-Hajj in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the day of judgment. The very first ayah of Surah Al-Hajj is, Ya ayyuhan nasu attaqu rabbakum inna zalazata sa'ati shay'un alim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the final hour. The first ayah of Surah Al-Hajj. Perhaps a person could say that it's because of the vivid, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates a vivid picture in our minds regarding the final hour, and it's something which we can perhaps begin to understand when witnessing the journey of Hajj. When we see millions of people all dressed in simple clothing. In fact, like the shroud, it's mentioned in narration that a person will be resurrected in the shroud that they are buried in. So then we will see so many different people resembling the same exact garb, the same outfits. All of them being gathered and ushered into different places, just like the Day of Judgment. The sun will be so bright and so much heat. People will be sweating in their perspiration. The reality of our bodies will come to light. The fact that now they're like the normal body odor that we emanate, every single human being, normally perhaps it's clouded and shrouded, and we're protected from that because alhamdulillah we have, we're living such a luxurious, nice, peaceful, alhamdulillah, comfortable life. But over there, when a person has to be in the state of ihram for days, he's not able to put on perfume, he's not able to put on like a fragrance or nice smelling deodorant, then the reality of our creation and our bodies comes to light, and a person is able to reflect. When he reflects on these things, it has a transformative experience. Then you realize, I'm going to stand before my Creator just like I am standing now in front of the Kaaba, just like I am standing now going from one place to another, so too on the Day of Judgment it will be very similar. So this is something to keep in mind. At the same time, this is just with regards to the state of a person. Then another thing, when you are in that state, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions فَلَا رَفَثَ وَلَا فُسُوقَ وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ, pertaining to the ihram, that when a person is in this state, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us that these things should not take place, that a person should not speak about intimacy, he should not be intimate with his spouse, nor should he speak about such things. Similarly, a person should refrain from all types of sin. وَلَا جِدَالَ فِي الْحَجِّ, there should be no argumentation. Allah Ta'ala is warning us because of the very mere fact that it is going to happen. Subhanallah. And now, perhaps if a person thinks about it, why is Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala talking about these things when a person goes for Hajj, that it should not happen? Perhaps it is extremely inappropriate for such an individual who is witnessing such an event, which resembles the Day of Judgment, which resembles, the true reality or the natural progression of life, the fact that he is going to stand before his Creator. Perhaps it is extremely inappropriate for such a person to entertain the thought of being intimate with one's spouse. When it comes to the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, Rasulullah told her that on the Day of Judgment, people are going, there's a time on the Day of Judgment where people will not be clothed. There will be a time during the Day of Judgment where people will not be clothed. So she asked, Ya Rasulullah, how are the people going to, how are they going to take that seriously? Won't the men be looking at the women and women looking at the men? And won't everyone be embarrassed, so on and so forth? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that is a time where every person will be worried about themselves. Then every single individual will be preoccupied. كل امرئ لكل امرئ منهم يومئذ شأن يغنيه. That every person will be preoccupied with their own condition. How are they going to be before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? So similarly, perhaps it is extremely inappropriate to entertain such thoughts. But along with that, when it comes to fusuq, sin, there's so many opportunities to sin. One of them especially being protecting the gaze. This is extremely important. Then the muhaddithun, they mention that just like a person will receive much more virtue on the day by being in the Haramain Sharifain, in Makkah Mukarram, Madinah Munawwarah, whatever a person does, they will receive the multiplication of reward. For example, even performing salah in Makkah Mukarram is 100,000 times more rewarding than performing salah anywhere else. Similarly, at the same time, the greater the reward, the greater the risk. The greater the reward, the greater the risk. The ulama mentioned that just like a person will receive multiplication of reward, a person will also receive a more severe punishment if he sins. Now imagine, in that state, in that blessed area, if a person is not capable of controlling himself, controlling his gaze, despite being dressing the part and acting the part and going through all the motions, reminding him of the hereafter, if a person is still not capable of holding himself back from sinning, then only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what is in store for such a person. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. One thing especially is to protect our gaze. Why? It comes in a hadith, Fadl bin Abbas radiallahu anhuma, on the day of Eid, Yawm al-Nahar, when Rasulullah was performing his Hajj, then on the day of Yawm al-Nahar, on the 10th, he sat, Fadl bin Abbas, on the back of his own conveyance. Now can you imagine the whole Hajj process? They're wearing the ihram. He is with Ashraful Makhluqat, Sayyidul Anbiya al-Mursaleen, right behind Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Can we ever think that such a person would have evil thoughts? That too, he's a Sahabi. It's not possible, not fathomable. But what happened on that occasion, there was another woman, this narration is in Sahih Bukhari. She came to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Fadl ibn Abbas was a very handsome man, and it's mentioned in the narration, she was quite a beautiful woman as well. So Fadl ibn Abbas, it just so happened that his gaze fell on that woman, and he was looking at her. So what did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam do? We're not talking about whether it was a sin or not. Of course, can you even do you think it could be a sin? If you're behind such a righteous person, after completing one of the most virtuous of acts, understanding, wearing the ihram, it's not possible, it's inconceivable to think that he was thinking of such a thing. And that too, he was a Sahabi radiallahu anhu maraduhan. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took him by his chin, and he turned his face. away. Subhanallah. And then in one narration of Tabrani, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentioned, رَأَيْتُ غُلَامًا حَدَثًا وَجَارِيَةً حَدَثًا. I saw a young man and a young woman. فَخَشِيتُ أَن يَدْخُلَ بَيْنَهُمَا الشَّيْطَانِ. I feared that shaitan would come in between them. So this is something to really protect ourselves. If Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was looking after the Sahaba radiallahu anhum in this way, what about ourselves? Of course we have to protect our gaze. Then also when it comes to argumentation, there will be hundreds of occasions. We have to do our absolute best to maintain our own decorum, to ensure that we are also using the best, most sweetest of words in the kindest of manners and interacting with others, always giving them the benefit of the doubt. We should not consider our leaders and our guides as, scapegoats to constantly blame them for all the different problems that we see, or all the different logistical issues. This is not the time to worry about. There's 2 million people, in fact probably more than that, that are going to be taken from one place to another. Everything is being facilitated. Of course there are going to be ups and downs. So it's not our job to constantly comment and worry about that. Rather, we should worry about ourselves and ignore, and anytime we have any such occasions, we should remember that we're in the state of ihram and protect ourselves from engaging in such. These are two things when it comes to the state of ihram. Then when it comes to other things as well, when it comes to rami, then we can think and reflect about the history behind it. Perhaps one can say it symbolizes the victory of good over evil, and it reminds a person about the battle between man and shaitan. Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he pelted because he was throwing stones at shaitan. Something to reflect on, a time to make dua also, that Allah keeps us steadfast. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, after doing rami, he would make dua. It's mentioned in the narration of Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah that he would make dua for the amount of time it takes a person to recite Surah Al-Baqarah. Subhanallah. Then also think about when the sacrifice is happening. We may not be sacrificing it, but when we read the message of the sacrifice, inshallah, having been done on our behalf, then we can reflect on the fact that Ibrahim alayhi salam, what was he doing? He was sacrificing everything for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The love of his life, the child which he was blessed with after, years of his life, years of yearning for a child. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally blessed him with a child in his extreme old age. And yet that too, he was prepared to sacrifice him for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What about you and I when it comes to our sins, our bad habits? When we see that message, we should also reflect on the fact that, Ya Allah, I am prepared to sacrifice my life, and I will sacrifice all of these things for your pleasure. This is a new life. This is a new slate. Grant me that one chance, Ya Allah, and it's a time to refortify our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then when it comes to every step of the way, let us reflect on the history behind it. And if we just ponder and take a minute to really reflect, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up various different lessons to us. For example, when it comes to sa'i, or when it comes to tawaf, a person is constantly circling around the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's mentioned in a hadith that al-hajju wal-umaru wafdullah da'uhu fa'ajabuh, that these are the delegations of the delegation which is presented before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on behalf of mankind. You are the ones who are selected for this occasion. Make dua for all of mankind. Make dua for our brothers and sisters that are suffering throughout the world. Make dua for ourselves. We're circling around the house as though we are telling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, I am not going to leave here. Please accept my hajj and accept all the du'as that I have. When it comes to sa'i, reflect on the fact that Hajar, she went from one mountain to another. And then if you think about it, she went and climbed Mount Safa as high as she looked, as far as she could, and she didn't see any help for her child who was dying out of thirst. So what did she do? She went down and she climbed the next mountain, Marwa. She looked at the mountain, and then she climbed the mountain, she looked as far as and wide as she could. Did she see any help? No. Those we understand to be like the tallest of mountains in the area, in the region. There was no help in sight. But what did she do? Allah loved that action so much, He preserved it for every human being to do to the end of time. What was that? She understood that even though it's seemingly impossible for any help to be available to help my child, I know for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nothing is impossible. So that's why we don't just go up Mount Safa once and then down and then up Marwa, but we go back and forth. She continued because she knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will definitely send help. It is my job to present myself and to beg Allah, and Allah will provide the results. This is something to think about when we are making du'as on those occasions as well. So this is the second point. And then so the first point is we're doing it only for the sake of Allah. Let us always reflect on that. Secondly, let us try to reflect on every stage of the way. And then lastly, let us prepare, have goals. Don't just go there on this journey and think that, I'm going to make as many salawat as I can, as many du'as as I can. If we don't prepare beforehand and set goals for ourselves and write down the du'as that we want, then we cannot expect to really maximize on our time. Any person who wants to maximize on their time, they're taught to create a schedule. So we should also do that to the best of our ability as well. When it comes to, these are just 3 points, inshallah. I know I went about 5 minutes over time. But inshallah, these are 3 points that we can reflect on. And in part of spirit of getting ready and preparing for this journey, we can inshallah purchase one book. There are many books that are written on the topic. Just get one and do your best to read it cover to cover before you go. So a few good ones. This is one here, Hajj and Umrah, the Epic Journey, written by Sheikh Asim Ahmad, Mawlana Asim Ahmad. It's a very, very good, very interesting read where he talks about his journey. It's written beautifully, mashallah. You'll never get bored. Subhanallah. Then another one is Fadail al-Hajj of Hazrat Shaykh Zakaria rahmatullahi alayhi. This is also quite a really nice read. If we have the opportunity to read through the entire thing, it will really, rejuvenate our spirits and prepare us for this journey so that we can maximize. There's also another book written by Sheikh Hussein Sattar. He has a whole entire book on the topic, so we can maybe look and get that. There's also another book written by Mawlana Salimullah Durat Saab, Sheikh Salim Durat Hafidhullah. It's a wonderful book also on the topic. So let us pick one and read it from cover to cover. And inshallah, in doing so, we will find, inshallah, we are far better prepared. And the last thing that I would mention is we should ensure that we, I wanted to talk about the ayah. So all of these things will end with the ayah, inshallah. Al-Hajju ashhurun ma'lumat, faman farada fihinna al-hajja fala rafatha wala fusuqa wala jidala fil hajj. Whoever is going on this journey, then there should be no obscenity, no immorality, no sin, nor any argumentation. وَمَا تَفْعَلُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ يَعْلَمُهُ اللَّهُ. Whatever good you do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is aware of it. وَتَوْزَوَّدُوا. And make preparations. فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ زَادِ التَّقْوَى. But the best of preparations is, of course, taqwa, righteousness, piety. This is how we will prepare ourselves. Another thing to keep in mind is, the more we prepare as far as dunyawi asbab are concerned, like we make the proper preparations, then inshallah the easier and more comfortable we will be, and the better spiritual experience we will have. If we don't make the necessary preparations, we don't pack properly, we don't buy the things that we need to keep ourselves comfortable to the best of our ability, then we will find it will be more difficult to get in the zone, so to say, more difficult to connect spiritually with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we don't prepare and acquaint ourselves with the actions of Hajj, instead of going through it and having a spiritual revolutionary experience, what will happen is we'll be constantly looking at our books. What are we supposed to do next? What are we supposed to do next? The whole entire journey will finish and we won't feel any change in our lives. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all husn al-tawfiq. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Inshallah, to maintain consistency, and inshallah I can we can read Surah Al-Kahf now. Inshallah. Inshallah, we'll do dua after reading Surah Al-Kahf, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا فلعلك باخع نفسك على آثار إن لم يؤمنوا بهذا الحديث أسفا إنا جعلنا ما على الأرض زينة لها لنبلوهم أيهم أحسن عملا وإنا لجاعلون ما عليها صعيدا جرزا أم حسبت أن أصحاب الكهف والرقيم كانوا من آياتنا عجبا إذ أوى الفتية إلى الكهف فقالوا ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا الذين كانت أعينهم في غطاء عن ذكري وكانوا لا يستطيعون سمعا أفحسب الذين كفروا أن يتخذوا عبادي من دوني أولياء إنا أعتدنا جهنم للكافرين نزلا قل هل ننبئكم بالأخسرين أعمالا الذين ضل سعيهم في الحياة الدنيا وهم يحسبون أنهم يحسنون صنعا أولئك الذين كفروا بآيات ربهم ولقائه فحبطت أعمالهم فلا نقيم لهم يوم القيامة وزنا ذلك جزاؤهم جهنم بما كفروا واتخذوا آياتي ورسلي هزوا إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات كانت لهم جنات الفردوس نزلا خالدين فيها لا يبغون عنها حولا قل لو كان البحر مدادا لكلمات ربي لنفد البحر قبل أن تنفد كلمات ربي ولو جئنا بمثله مددا قل إنما أنا بشر مثلكم يوحى إلي أنما إلهكم إله واحد فمن كان يرجو لقاء ربه فليعمل عملا صالحا ولا يشرك بعبادة ربه أحدا اللهم لك الحمد كله ولك الشكر كله لا نحصي ثناء عليك أنت كما أثنيت على نفسك الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وآله كما لا نهاية لكمالك وعدد كماله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد كلما ذكره الذاكرون وصل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد كلما غفل عن ذكره الغافلون اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وعافنا واعف عنا اللهم اغفر وارحم وتجاوز عما تعلم إنك أنت الله الأعز الأكرم رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين اللهم إنا نسألك من كل خير أحاط به علمك في الدنيا والآخرة ونعوذ بك من كل شر أحاط به علمك في الدنيا والآخرة وأنت المستعان وعليك البلاغ ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم يا أرحم الراحمين ويا أكرم الأكرمين grant every single one of us the ability to go for Hajj Ya Arhamar Rahimin Ya grant us Ya Allah a Hajj Mabrur an accepted Hajj Ya Allah grant us the ability to go truly only for your sake Ya Arhamar Rahimin and have a truly revolutionary experience Ya Allah allow us to completely renew our slates and our connections with you Ya Arhamar Rahimin and live true devout lives Ya Arhamar Rahimin in your obedience Ya Allah Ya Allah, make the journey for all the Hujjaj extremely easy, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Facilitate everything with ease and afiyah and khair, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Make it easy for everyone to go and to come back, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, with an accepted Hajj, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Ya Allah, all those that are trying to go for Hajj, Ya Allah, grant the ability to go for Hajj, Ya Allah. All those who didn't have the ability this year, Ya Allah, grant the ability to go next year, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. All those that have gone for Hajj in the past, Ya Allah, grant them the ability to go again and again, Ya Allah. Take us time and again, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, to your Haramain Sharifain. Grant us the ability to go and perform Umrah, to go and perform Hajj, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, with accepted Umrahs and accepted Hajjs, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Ya Allah, grant us the ability to truly be true servants of yours, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, to please you and to please Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Ya Allah, grant us the ability to also prepare and present something to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as far as our a'mal are concerned, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, as far as Isaru Thawab is concerned, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Ya Allah, grant us the ability to use and maximize our time, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, when you are there. Protect us from sin, protect us from incurring your wrath, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, but rather make it easy for us, Ya Allah. Keep us guided, Ya Arhamar Rahimin, and Ya Arhamar Rahimin. We ask you for all the good that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked you for, and we ask you for protection from all the evil that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked you protection from. Ya Arhamar Rahimin, help all our brothers and sisters that are suffering throughout the world, Ya Arhamar Rahimin. Ya Allah, those that go for Hajj, Ya Allah, grant them the ability to keep everyone in their du'as, Ya Arhamar Rahim, especially the Ummah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma raham ummati Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma farrij an ummati Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma ghfir li ummati Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Jazallahu anna nabiyyana Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam bima huwa ahlu wa jazil anbiya kulluhum khayra wa salamun ala al-mursalin. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Amin bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.
All right, so one last announcement, inshallah. Jazakallahu Khairan for the kind words and the dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept from all of us going for Hajj, inshallah, and whoever is not going, the talab that we had to sit here and learn about it, and may Allah give us the opportunity to go as well. Inshallah, brother Qasim Bhatti, he donated some bags, some bottles, and portable stools for the outgoing Hujjaj, so they're outside. And some sweets as well, so when you can take it, inshallah. Obviously, it's preferable that the Hujjaj going, inshallah, that they take, and just remember that brother in your dua for helping out, inshallah. And please forgive all of us, inshallah, whatever limitations that we might have had as well. There's also the book stall as well, so the books that Mawlana Saad showed, you can purchase those books as well, inshallah. Jazakallahu Khairan. Qasim Bhatti is his name.